Oh, whoops.
Live streaming is on.
Okay, folks. I think we may be live. I'm not certain.
Oh, the little thing on there says live, so.
Yeah, I'm not sure about on. Well, there's the easy way to check this. Video. Okay, so yeah, apparently it is on. Uh, hold on. But this doesn't make any bloody sense. Okay. Okay, yeah, it is working. I don't know why it's working, but it's working. Hey, Lisa for Truth, bear with us while we get started. Ryan, prepare the keys. I'm going to post the link so we can get going. I don't know if you hear the keys jangling.
Now I'm doing jazz hands.
I think that's also accept. It's not traditional, but it is acceptable.
Yeah, it's movement, you know.
Okay, did you turn off your video?
Me, no.
Because yeah, for some reason it got turned off.
Yeah, on here I.
No, there you are again.
Yeah, it still looks like I have.
Because technology hates me.
Well, you get that wizard hex.
Now, that'd be more Arthur than me. I'm not a wizard. I am not a wizard. Granted, that would probably be the first thing a wizard would say, is that I'm not a wizard.
Yes.
Lisa, we're not talking about politics. That's an old description that got mixed up. Trying to fix it is on the to-do list. But yeah, this is not political. Again, that was last stream. There we go.
I mean, of course, we can always get political if you want.
Okay. That's not a great description, but I can go back and write a better one later. There we go. Okay, we're nearly ready, everyone. I'm sorry. If it makes listeners feel any better, I am planning on doing a second video after this one. Which I think me, Brian, and everyone else universally agrees I'm completely insane for doing. You know the book I want to read. What do you think, Brian? Am I nuts?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's gonna be quite the adventure.
Granted, it's going to be a bit at a time. I'm not going to read the whole thing at once because.
Oh no!
Okay, I'm crazy, but even I have limits.
I don't know that you could. The entire.
It's over 200 chapters.
Exactly. It's like that thing's thousands of pages long.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, no, I'm not reading the entire thing. I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to keep reading until I run out of steam. It's like, no.
Yeah, I was thinking more we'd sort of skim the cliff notes and get the interesting tidbits.
I was planning on just going a chapter at a time. Until, and then if you like it, keep going. If not, just give it up. Okay. Facebook's being difficult. I'm not going to bother sharing it everywhere. And your video's off again for reasons.
Hmm.
Have I mentioned how much I hate technology today? Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, Frozen, for the delays and mix-ups and the fact the internet hates me. But we're going to get started tonight. As always, welcome to tonight's episode of Paranormal Encyclopedia. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Mears, demonologist, paranormal investigator, and the Paranormal Encyclopedia. I am once again, after a long hiatus, it's been, at least a year, joined by my friend and co-host, Brian McKinley.
Yay!
So introduce yourself, Brian.
Well, as you said, I'm Brian McKinley, godfather of vampire thrillers and author of vampire novels. I do actually have something new that came out.
Really?
Just recently, yeah. I have a few vampire-related articles in the Horror Addict's Guide to Life, Volume 2, which has just recently been published. So
Congratulations.
a couple of nonfiction articles in there about vampire folklore.
That's absolutely awesome.
Pretty much that whole vampire history I used to do at conventions, I wrote it up, turned it into a series of articles, and sent it into horroraddicts.net. So now it's in published form.
Knowing that lecture, I think you deserve it. I'm glad to see it.
Thank you.
So tonight, you guys are getting 2 episodes. This is the first, which is not about politics, despite what YouTube may say, because Kevin has been out of practice with all of this and has made a couple of mistakes setting everything up. Tonight's topic is Demonology Bootcamp, or Demonology 101. It relates to the topic I did a while back when I covered the drooling idiot that is Pastor Greg Locke. And his wannabe witch hunter, or he is the wannabe witch finder general of whatever state that he is in. I don't know, and I don't really care enough to look it up. All I know is it's too far away from me to do what I want to do. If anyone who lives near enough to Greg Locke to do this, I have a wonderful idea that somebody really should do to get that guy's goat, which is buy a nice devil costume and a nice poster board sign, and just stand outside of his circus tent, because that's literally what it is, with a sign reading, "I am Satan and I approve of this message."
Nice.
It's like,
be funny.
Yeah, watching his head explode would be a lot of fun, and I'd consider doing it if he lived remotely near here, or I had the money to go visit. Granted, I'd be slightly worried about one of those psychos having a gun.
Yeah, probably.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading the Wikipedia article on him, and apparently he was there at the January 6th uprising in Washington. So he was part of all that. So I wouldn't put it past his followers to have guns.
Hey, Teresa Hall, welcome. Do you mean you're having connection problems, or I am? I think it looks good on my side, but who the hell knows? The internet hates me. At any rate, so we're going to be talking about the common mistakes, particularly Christians, and there's some other people make them too, about the entire concept of demonology. And this is not a theoretical discussion. This is based on personal first-hand experience. And kicking in some heads of people who have no idea at all what is going on. Greg Locke being a prime example. That man wouldn't know a demon if it punched him in the nose.
Well, I mean, let's face it, he's really just after money. The whole thing is a giant put on to attract followers and money.
Although there's also at least one mistake that an atheist YouTuber I otherwise respect keeps making that bothers me that I'm going to address because it also relates. He's good YouTube. I'll say it now. It's Telltale Atheist. Many of my viewers probably know him. He is a good YouTuber. I respect his content. But even when the good guys make mistakes, you got to call it out.
Hmm.
It's not a huge mistake, but it's pet peeve time. But after we do this episode, you guys are getting a bonus episode. So I've been thinking for ages about reading vampire fiction on my channel. And my original thought was to read my favorite, Dracula. Because everybody knows Dracula. I absolutely love Dracula. Why not read Dracula? Well, the problem with reading Dracula is everybody knows Dracula. Everybody loves Dracula. Lots of people read Dracula. But there is other vampire fiction that has long since moved into the public domain that isn't as well known. So I pick, because I am a masochist, Brian can attest to this and he knows the book in question. I have chosen to start reading chapters from the Penny Dreadful, Varney the Vampire. Varney the Vampire is an older book than Dracula by a couple of decades. You know how old? Brian?
I don't remember exactly. I know it predates Dracula. I know it predates, I think, Carmilla. I think it comes after.
Yeah, I want to say it's between Carmilla and.
Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah,
James.
no, the Vampire is the oldest vampire fiction in English.
Right. It is.
Not the oldest reference to vampires in English written work. Because there's
poems.
It's older than that even. Vampires were popular with the Romantics, but there's a couple of books of folklore that actually talk about vampires that are even older than the Romantics.
Right, yeah, because that's where the
poets
got the image.
King James I, in his book Demonology, briefly touches on vampires.
Oh.
And werewolves, believe it or not.
Didn't know that.
Yep. And no, I don't know Robert McCammon's They Thirst. Do you know that one, Brian?
Oh, yes, I do. It was McCammon's, I think, first or second novel. It's vampires take over modern day LA after a volcanic eruption, I think. Covers the city, covers the sun in ash. So they're able to just kind of go out and party and take over the whole city. I read it. It was actually a pretty good book. Apparently, the author is somewhat ashamed of it now and has not allowed it to go back into print since the original printing ran out. But I didn't think it was a bad modern day vampire novel at all.
Makes me think a little bit of a book I started reading and never quite got around to finishing called Midnight Mass by F. Paul Wilson.
Yes, that's another good one.
Yeah, which is not the basis of the series on Netflix, if anyone is wondering.
Yeah, no, I thought that originally. I was like, oh, they made a Netflix version of it. And it was like, no, it's different.
But no, the novel Midnight Mass is a post-apocalyptic novel where vampires have taken over the world.
Yeah.
It takes place in his Repairman Jack universe. Also, funny enough, there's a short story that's originally based on, which I read, that he originally wrote the short story, then turned it into a novel, where more precisely, not only do the vampires rise up and take over the world, Dracula leads the charge.
Of course.
And it's basic. The short story is just the story of the crazy nun fighting a one-woman war against vampires. Dracula never appears. It just briefly mentioned that he was in charge. Basically, he's the king vampire.
Yeah.
And of course, the novel seems to drop that idea. They're just vampires with their own organization. But anyway, we're going to read Varney the Vampire. It is one of the first vampire novels in the English language. Beginning of a bunch of vampire tropes as well, as I understand it. and very much it's one of the earliest with the romantic, suave, self-loathing vampire idea.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it'll be fun, and you can all make fun of me as I descend into madness reading a book that is literally over 200 chapters. That was written over like a 2-year period. I'll talk more about it when I get onto that part of things. But it basically was written over a 2-year period. Coming out,
I thought it was longer than that.
not even longer.
I
But
thought
it
he
came
ran
out.
that thing in magazines for like a decade.
Yeah,
That's why it's so long, because it was like a soap opera. He just
but it came
kept
out like every
adding,
week.
yeah, he kept adding more and more to the story just to keep
Yeah.
prolonging it.
But yeah, he kept releasing a chapter every week. It went on for years. It's meandering. It's very inconsistent because it's so long. He'd forget details he started with earlier and
Yeah,
go in
exactly.
different
His own
directions.
mythology changes.
Yeah. But that is not the topic that we're here for right now. So, yeah, people get a lot wrong about even the most basic ideas of demonology, and particularly Christians get a lot wrong in the basic ideas of demonology. I'm going to pick a lot on Greg Locke because he's a really good example of what they
and,
get wrong.
and he deserves it.
Oh, yes. But he is one example of many, not the only one. The guy is a drooling idiot, for God's sakes. I can't emphasize enough how much I can't stand him. But let's see, where do I even start? I'll start with the minor thing because it doesn't actually relate to Christians, but it's a bug up my rear end that I want to address. Folks, for God's sakes, voodoo is real. I don't care if you don't believe in magic. That's not relevant to my point. Voodoo is a religion. Say, as I love, and I've spoken positively about it more than once. A lot of what Telltale Atheist does. He knows cults much better than I do, and I respect that. But he keeps saying that voodoo isn't real. And that's just factually incorrect. It's like that's as absurd as saying Roman Catholicism isn't real. It's a religion. It is a set of rituals and practices meant to honor a deity. Whether the deity exists or not is a separate question. The religion absolutely objectively exists.
Okay. I'm guessing what he probably means is when people commonly think of voodoo, they think of the effects, the charms, the curses, all of that kind of the effects that it's supposed to have on the real world, and that's what he's maintaining is not actually provably real.
Which is a different criticism.
Yeah.
That
That's
could be
like arguing whether or not prayer works.
Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of psychological studies on what they call psychosomatic death, or more colloquially, it's called voodoo death, where people who have been cursed actually do wind up dying. And there's possible psychological explanations for that. But Teresa Hall makes an excellent point. And this is the main thing I want to get to. Voodoo is a religion. It's a very old religion, I might add. As it's practiced in the United States, it's a syncretic religion that incorporates Christianity, particularly Roman Catholicism, with various other practices, primarily African tribal religions. It's why voodoo, Santeria, and other religions are commonly called Afro-Caribbean religions, because they started in Africa, and then they got influence as they were brought through the slave trade to the Caribbean and then to the United States. And how voodoo is practiced in the United States and how it's practiced in Haiti, and how it's practiced in Africa are distinctive things.
Sure.
But there is voodoo, which is a religion, and is a monotheistic religion, believe it or not. Because there's only one god in voodoo. but it's a deistic God. He created the universe, and that's the end of the story. He doesn't get involved. He doesn't answer prayers. You don't go have a beer with the man. He is off being God. He has spirits that he created known as the Loa.
Okay.
Those are what interact with people, and that is what is usually paid homage to and what rituals summon and things of that nature. Related to voodoo, but distinct from it, is a practice called hoodoo. Hoodoo is a magical tradition. The curses that you think of, gris-gris, particularly all the things that get associated with voodoo in the United States, other than animal sacrifice, which is a legitimate part of voodoo. And I'm going to circle back to that in a second because there's something worth saying there. But the voodoo doll in particular is hoodoo, not voodoo.
Okay.
And here's why that distinction is important. Just like voodoo is a syncretism between Christianity and African tribal religion, hoodoo is a syncretic magical practice combining African tribal magics and European magics, particularly European witchcraft. What we call voodoo dolls is actually the European idea of a puppet.
Right.
It shows up all over the Salem witch trials, for example. And they didn't get it from voodoo. They got it from Europe. And African practitioners in the United States picked it up from them. In fact, in African religious practices, dolls are traditionally used to heal.
Right. I remember that.
You can certainly argue that hoodoo doesn't work. And that's not an argument I'm trying to get into today. But hoodoo and voodoo are not synonyms. You can believe in the religion of voodoo and not practice hoodoo. You can practice the magic of hoodoo. In fact, there are Christians who do not consider themselves practitioners of voodoo because some practitioners of voodoo also see themselves as Christian. I'm just talking about straight Catholics and things like that do not go to the tribal the ceremonies that practice hoodoo. There are Wiccans that practice hoodoo. Because they practice for good luck, they practice it to protect themselves from curses and things of that nature. They are distinct ideas. I would also go so far to argue that it is factually incorrect to say that hoodoo doesn't exist. Because whether you believe it works or not, it's still a system of beliefs and ritualistic practices.
Okay. That's fair.
You can believe that High Mass, practiced by the Catholic Church, the Eucharist does not literally turn into the body of Christ, as Catholics claim. But that doesn't mean that High Mass isn't real.
True.
You go to the Catholic Church any Sunday and attend one.
Yeah, it's a good analogy.
Yeah. But yeah, that was the one thing I wanted to clear up there. Because again, and Teresa Hall, who took a class in the subject, commented that there were Christians in her class. Teresa, one of these days, I think I want to have you on the show because I think you'd be a fun interview. I know a fair bit about voodoo and I've even lectured on it, but I'm by no means an expert. But getting back to Christianity in particular and religious nuts and the things they get wrong about demonology. One of the most infuriating common mistakes that Christians make is the assumption that demon possession is A, the cause of mental illness, and B, is the cause of sin. Theologically, these are not a concept. These are completely inaccurate and offensively so. For thousands of years, since long before Christianity, in fact, we've been associating demon possession or the gods with mental illness. Epilepsy. Have you ever heard of epilepsy being called the disease of the gods?
Oh yeah. No, they thought that Caesar had it and that it indicated that he was divinely touched, especially because of his family's connection to the goddess Venus.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
This is one of many reasons I keep you around, not just to jangle keys.
I'm good for something once in a while, yeah.
You're good for a bunch of things, my friend. But people thought it was divine. It was a sign from the gods.
Mhm.
Christians would later pick up the idea that it was caused by demonic possession. Schizophrenia is another popular one that people confuse with demonic possession, as is dissociative identity disorder. Greg Locke, as I said, I'm going to pick on that SOB a lot in this video, has commented about how he could walk into a mental hospital and cure a whole lot of people by doing deliverance ministry.
Yeah, I'd love to see him actually prove that.
Yeah, I wouldn't, just because of the damage he could do and the damage he's already doing. Because here's the ugly reality of why this pisses me off so much. This is dangerous for a couple of reasons. For a start, people have been burned at the stake throughout history because of this idiotic logic.
Sure.
But beyond that, when you tell a mentally ill person that the voices in their head are real and demons, or that the alters of their alter personalities in their dissociative identity disorder are demons, you can make it so much worse.
Oh, sure.
You can convince them that they can't be cured, that they're damned, and they can commit suicide. They can stop taking drugs, which can kill people.
Yeah.
This is not true. Anyone who thinks that mental illness is caused by demonic possession or even demonic interference, it probably needs a little bit of psychiatric help themselves at the very least. People have asked, and it is an absolutely fair question, how do I differentiate between the two? It's actually pretty simple. Well, it's actually very complicated, but it's still pretty simple, because here's what it comes down to. If you find a little kid who is angry and cursing out his parents and won't go to church, I'm very, very sorry. This is horrible news, but you have something far scarier than a demon on your hands. You have a teenager. And I can't help you with teenagers. That's not in my job description. If objects are flying across the room when no one is touching them, or people who have never spent a day in a class for it suddenly speak fluent Latin, okay, now maybe we start talking about demons. Those are two very specific examples that actually happened, which is why I chose them. But
there was also a quote actually that you said in an earlier when you were giving a talk one time that I remember, but it was just a nice, easy line that always stuck with me, was that demons don't respond to medication.
Absolutely true.
That's one easy way to see the difference, right away.
It's a danger. It's a good line, and I stand by it. Here's my concern with it, because I've had people ask me, and not because people have misunderstood it, but people have asked, and it's fair.
Yeah.
If someone seems to have a demon and it responds to medication, it's mental illness.
Yeah.
If someone seems to have a demon and doesn't respond to medication, it's actually probably still mental illness.
Yeah. It takes some time to get the right medication.
Exactly. And some medications can even make it worse.
Yeah.
Unless something is happening that falls entirely outside of the realm of conventional science. Like, again, objects getting hurled. There is no scientific explanation for a book levitating and flying across the room.
Yeah.
That is, okay, let's talk demons. Anything short of that may be worth investigating. Don't get me wrong, because not every time that there are people that seem to be mentally ill, that have demonic problems. And if you want evidence of this, find an open-minded psychiatrist, especially someone who's worked with severe cases or people or the criminally insane. Everyone I've ever asked who has that kind of clinical experience can think of at least one case that even made them wonder, no matter how skeptical they are.
Hmm.
One time when that person just seemed to know stuff they had no business knowing, or weird coincidence has happened around them. And books have been written, psychiatrists have written books about this. And about that there are just there are things that fall outside of our scientific understanding. We know, I mean, pretty much even the most skeptical people know there are at least a few things going on in the world we don't really have a good explanation for.
Oh yeah.
That certainly isn't proof of the demonic. But again, it's like there's this distinction. And it is morally unethical and dangerous to tell someone they have demons without having a really good reason. Especially also, demonic possession is rare.
Yeah.
It's getting more common. All forms of demonic activity have been getting more common for the last probably 50 years or more. And there's a ton of theories about why. I honestly think, and because a lot of people think it's a sign that the end of the world is coming. The end of the world has been coming for at least the last 2,000 years. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I've talked about this before.
Yeah.
But what I think it really comes down to is interest in the occult is higher than it's been in almost centuries. Well, maybe not centuries, but at least decades. It's been we've seen a resurgence of interest in the occult and the paranormal that we haven't seen at least since the rise of the spiritualist movement in the 19th century.
Yeah.
Now, Teresa and other pagans that listen know that I am not anti-non-Christian religion or anti-occult practices. But the reality is where interest in white magic and doing things to help people starts to rise, the left-hand path does as well.
Hmm.
People, because practicing magic for the benefit of other people can take a little more time and isn't as guttural as, somebody hurt me and now I want revenge. That's white magic isn't going to help you too much there.
Hmm.
The other thing you'll run into particularly there is one of the basic reasons that particularly teenagers turn to magic now and throughout history is power. Teenagers don't have a lot of power in their lives. Their parents get to tell them what to do. Their teachers will get to tell them what to do. The government gets to tell them what to do. I mean, you could be old enough to vote and you still can't drink.
Yeah.
For God's sakes, under the law. Magic offers, and from a psychological perspective, even if you don't believe magic works, the reality is magic offers a sense of power, a sense of being able to control that which cannot be controlled.
Yeah.
And that desire for control is not inherently evil, but you can take it too far. And that's kind of why the dark side of the occult and why demonic activity is more common now than it had even 20 years ago, at least in my personal opinion. Or maybe it is the end of the world and I'm wrong. But that's a whole other subject.
Well, the good thing is if the world is ending, there won't be that much time for people to say, I told you so.
This is true.
So there's that upside.
Especially because if the whole rapture thing is true, and I don't actually believe in it, I'll be getting right out of here. Your guy's problem. For those who are wondering and aren't aware, I'm generally somewhere between a view that Revelation is somewhat cyclical. Instead of being a single final event, it's a series of events that keeps happening. Or actually, increasingly, of what they call the Peterist view, which is that Revelation isn't prophecy, it's history. Because if you take the name Nero Caesar,
Mhm.
and I mean the full title Nero, whatever Caesar, I don't remember the whole
Yeah,
thing.
he had like 5 names.
But there's particularly a 3-name version that's pretty common.
Oh, okay.
But if you
Nero
write
Caesar Augustus or something.
something like that, but if you write it down in Hebrew, and then you apply what's called gematria to it,
Hmm.
gematria, it's a gross oversimplification to say this, but essentially gematria is Jewish numerology.
Okay, yeah. That's where you get the 666.
Yes, and Nero equals 666.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I have heard that before.
but even on top of that, the Book of Revelation talks about 7 churches and gives warning to these 7 churches about things they're doing wrong and things that they need to change. Those are all churches that existed in the first century. We have
Sure.
records of them. So there is definitely a case that can be made there that no, it was the first century. Christianity wasn't legalized the way it became under Constantine. So they were recording what was going on in their struggle to survive. Because while the reality is how much the Christians were persecuted by the Romans ebbs and flows depending on the emperor.
Yeah.
Nero was one of the worst. I want to say Nero, Tiberius, and Caligula were like some of the particularly infamous ones.
Well, actually, what's funny is Caligula was a horrible emperor and did terrible things, but I don't think he particularly cared that much about the Jews one way or the other. He was mostly out to have a good time for himself and to rub the Senate and the aristocracy's nose in his own personal power. That's mostly he was a 4-year power trip. Yeah, he only reigned for 4 years. Yeah, he was only there for 4 years before they killed him. They got so fed up with him, they assassinated him.
You
And it was
can't blame
mostly because
him.
it was mostly because he humiliated the aristocracy in the Senate.
Well, I mean, he made his horse a senator.
Not a Senate. Yeah, no, it wasn't actually that. He made him a consul, but it was mostly a joke saying, "My fucking horse is better at this job than any of you." Like there's a lot of people that think that Caligula really wasn't as insane as he's depicted, but that he just had a really nasty kind of sense of humor, and he just really enjoyed having a go at the senators and the aristocrats by like sleeping with their wives and holding orgies and forcing them all to attend and just doing things like that.
Here I said the show wasn't going to be political, and now we're getting into Roman politics. I love it.
Roman politics are all kinds of fun.
Oh, no question. And I hadn't known the consul, but I had heard he made his horse a senator, and I'd heard it was largely basically him trolling the Senate.
Yeah, that's mostly what it was.
It wasn't him crazy. It's like, no, he's just a troll.
Yeah,
but certainly Nero was not kind to Christians. I mean, for God's sakes, he blamed the Great Fire of Rome on them, which was not fair.
True, but again, that was probably more political than anything else. The Christians made an easy scapegoat, just like the Jews did in post World War I Germany. So it was an easy group for Nero to kind of, anytime criticism would come at him, he would say, "Oh no, it's really these Christians that are the problem. That's why everything is getting messed up."
Although in defense of Nero, the fire wasn't his fault either.
No, the records of the time say that he actually did his best to organize getting it put out and whatnot. It was other stuff that he did a little later in his reign that was really horrible and and mostly was just mass murdering people for their money, forcing them to leave everything in their will to the empire or the emperor and then having them killed. Yeah, he did a lot of that.
Yeah, but it's like no. As I understand it, the record seems to say that Nero wasn't even in Rome when the fire started. When he found out about it, he rushed back and started organizing firefighting.
Yeah, I think so.
And certainly, there's no. Not only is there no truth whatsoever to the idea that he fiddled while Rome burned, that isn't even possible because the fiddle wasn't invented for something like another 1,000 years.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have been a liar that he was playing if he had decided
Yeah.
to actually compose a poem. But yeah, that's mostly just tying in the fact that his love of entertainment and the theater was not popular because that was considered too much Greek influence on a good solid, Roman. He was considered to have way too much Greek influence and love for
Mhm.
Greek culture.
But back on topic, it's interesting.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
There's nothing
Little
more
detail.
I didn't know. I'll be the first to admit. But one of the other things you run into is there's this idea that homosexuals are possessed by demons,
Hmm.
or that rapists or murderers, or people that are obsessed with junk food, or addicted to drugs, or addicted to sex, or video games, or any other undesirable or seen by some people to be undesirable trait is demonic possession. I also saw a hilarious suggestion a while back that transgender individuals are actually possessed by ghosts of the opposite gender. So, to me, the answer to this is so does that mean straight people are possessed by people of the same gender? It's like, wait, could this be like the explanation of all human sexuality is ghost possession?
Yeah, that's a new one.
Yeah.
At least on me. I hadn't heard that theory yet.
Um, as anyone who's listened to the show for any length of time knows, I am pro LGBT. Always have been, always built, will be. When I first found out about the entire concept of homophobia, because I was raised in a family that wasn't, my response was, "This is just stupid. Why does anyone care?" And pretty much, I still find the entire idea stupid. I believe in a heap and helping of if you don't like it, mind your own business.
Yeah.
What consenting adults do in their own bedrooms is their business, not mine. And yep, but even aside from that, even if you think that homosexuality is evil, it's not caused by demon possession. For God's sakes, most crime, most sinful behavior is caused by demon possession. Um, it is true that many murderers and many other people that are guilty of serious immoral acts, murderers, maybe rapists, I think very likely child molesters, are demonically possessed. There's evidence of it with a number of serial killers, for example. There are accounts, for example, that before the execution of Ted Bundy, a lot of weird and unexplainable things were going on in his cell. What would commonly be called poltergeist activity. And I have it from reliable secondhand sources. Yeah, that all died down after a visit by a priest, which also happened right shortly before his change of heart, when he started confessing and apologizing and seeming to feel actual remorse for what he did.
Hmm.
Um, and there's other ones that Jeffrey Dahmer certainly showed an interest in the occult and the paranormal. I mean, he poured acid into the skulls of his victims, trying to create zombies and things of that nature. Jack the Ripper. There's some suggestions of an occult element to his crimes. Um, But the thing to realize when I say this is people tend to think that when you say many serial killers are possessed or Hitler was likely possessed, that what I mean is they were possessed and that's why they were serial killers. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is actually the other way around. As I've talked about before in the show, and this is very much Demonology 101, there's a concept in theology and in the practical demonology I do of actually working with people who have demonic problems called grounds. Demons can't just walk into your life and start wrecking the joint. If they could, we'd all be dead. They need permission to enter this world. Grounds. Grounds happens in a couple of ways. One of the most common is invitation. You start practicing satanic rituals. And I don't mean the satanic temple. I mean actual devil worship. You start practicing black magic. You start fooling around with Ouija boards, and you draw spiritual attention to you. And it's not fun spiritual attention. Another way is what's called attraction. Evil people draw evil spirits. It's not why they are, serial killers aren't serial killers because they are possessed. They are possessed because they are serial killers. It's a form of punishment. And that's an important distinction to make. Because here's the reality of that situation. If demon possession is the cause of sinful behavior, all of Christian theology goes out the window. The devil does not make people do things. The entire idea is absurd. People do evil things because they're people. There is what's called what people are confusing with demonic possession is what's called the ordinary activity of demons. And I'm going further into theology than I meant to, but I think it's worth saying. There are two types of ways that demons, broadly speaking, interact with the world. Ordinary activity and extraordinary activity. Extraordinary activity is the stuff they make horror movies about. Go watch The Conjuring, the Amityville Horror, The Exorcist. You'll get the general idea. Ordinary is what you see in cartoons, where people have the angel and the demon on their shoulder whispering in their ear. They tempt, they entice, they try to convince you that that bad thing you wanted to do isn't so serious. But they don't make people do things. Because again, if the devil made you do it, you're not responsible for your actions. If I put a gun to your head and say, rob that bank or I'm going to shoot you, I'm the one who committed a crime, even if you robbed the bank. And that's both a concept in morality and a concept in law. Making people do things takes away their personal responsibility, which destroys foundations of Christianity with the entire idea that we have to be saved from our sins. It also destroys the entire basic concept of ethics.
And free will.
Again, and free will. You can't have an ethical system where you're not, if no one's actually responsible for their own actions. It doesn't work anymore. Which is a whole other lecture about why the whole idea that free will is an illusion annoys me. Particularly because I'm a firm believer that free will exists. People argue about nature versus nurture. Are we a product of our genetics? Are we a product of our upbringing? Are we a product of the two interacting with each other?
Yeah, that's what I think.
I think that third one is true to a point.
Yeah.
But I think it does an injustice to what people can do to say that's the entire end of the story. Because people change. People, you can be an addict. You can come from 10 generations of addicts have the neurological and genetic predispositions to it. Have your brain chemistry altered by the use of physically addictive drugs. And you can get clean.
Oh, yeah.
It takes a ton of work, don't get me wrong. But there are people that, by nature, they were raised by addicts. It's in their genetics that do become addicted, that do break free of that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The nature versus nurture, neither of that tries to say that there's no choice involved. There's always choice. What the nature versus nurture debate really
But there are
comes down
lots of
to is
people who do say
possesses you as an individual to make choice A over choice B when both are equally, available.
That's true, and I agree with that. The problem is there are people who think there is no choice.
Oh yeah,
That
no,
we're simply products of our upbringing. And I don't agree with that idea. Because people do change.
Yeah, exactly.
I think my personal opinion on the subject is that people don't want to change. Change takes work.
Yeah.
You can't. It's absolutely true. If you're a drug addict, you cannot just wake up tomorrow and decide, you know what, I'm not going to be an addict anymore, and poof, everything stops. You have to work at it. You have to go get into some kind of therapy. There's a process to it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, going against your basic nature is probably one of the hardest things in the world to do for a person.
Absolutely. My great complaint with humans when it comes to free will isn't the idea we don't have it, it's how rarely we exercise it. We'd rather not do the work.
Yeah.
American society in particular is all about the quick fix.
Yep.
And it doesn't work that way. You know it doesn't work that way. I know that. I think most people know that there is no quick fix for things. If you have an infection, you go on antibiotics and it goes away. Even then, you still got to take the antibiotics.
Yeah, and usually it takes like a week.
A week, but it's like there aren't simple solutions, and people want simple solutions. They don't want to go to therapy. They want to just take a pill and have their mental illness go away. Oh wow! But Teresa all said an eagle just flew over her back porch. That is extremely cool. Not remotely related, but still extremely cool.
Nice symbolism.
Yeah. But people have a will in this world, and it's a question of using that will. Which is also fun, actually does relate back to demonology. As I've said a few times on the show, the reason that demonic possession is so rare is it requires an act of will. You have to consent. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that for obvious reasons. Which leads into all sorts of other complicated issues. Pretty much the entire nature of exorcism is a contest of free will. Because you're bringing in God to the situation and kicking things out, but the person still actually has to step in and make the choice. Because the reality is, I can call in the most powerful exorcist in human. I could bring in Jesus Christ to perform an exorcism, and he can kick the demon out. It's gonna go. He's God, for heaven's sakes. But that's not gonna do any good if they let the demon back in 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
It's like you can make somebody go to rehab and dry them out, so that the drug of choice is out of their system entirely. It's not going to do you any good if they get out of rehab and they pick up a beer or whatever again.
Yeah.
There is a chain. Exorcism is about giving the person the power to make the choice, but they still have to actually make the choice. Which is also why a lot of my jobs is a little bit like trying to give people therapy. Just because needing to get them to grasp certain ideas. Um, let's see, what are some other common things I can address here? Although this has already gone much longer than I would have originally intended. I have in theory been trying to keep these shorter just by virtue of long videos don't do as well in the algorithm.
Yeah, people
But
don't tend to click as much if it's over an hour. I know that.
yeah,
You could address like what actual powers demons have versus what they're usually rumored to have.
that's an excellent question. Um, so a lot of this, actually, if you want a pretty good idea of what particularly someone possessed by a demon can do, watch The Exorcist.
Hmm.
While for all of that stuff to happen in the same case would be extraordinary. And that'd be like Satan showed up or something level of crazy.
Especially the head turning around. I've heard
Uh,
that's impossible,
yeah,
regardless.
that's impossible. That would be the one exception. Everything else you see in that movie is taken from actual cases of demonic possession.
Okay.
There were a pair of Jesuit advisors that worked on that movie that signed off, and people like myself or Lou or Ed Warren who watch it, you can see the signs that people were involved that knew what they were talking about. Certain lines, like when the demon says, when they ask how the long demon is going to remain inside of Reagan, and it says, "So she rots and lies stinking in the earth," is a very demonic type of thing to say. But objects moving without any apparent, objects flying around the room, weird smells, blood and other matter dripping from the walls, hearing voices, being able to record voices, seeing apparitions, seeing demonic forms around you are all very common. Being able to get photographs of these things, being able to speak languages the person shouldn't know, like you will get small children that have all of a sudden developed fluency in Hebrew, and I don't mean modern Hebrew, I mean biblical Hebrew or Serbo-Croatian or some other language that the person has never taken a class of in their life, and all of a sudden they can communicate in it. What's fascinating about that is someone who has had a stroke will sometimes lapse into other languages.
Yeah.
Difference, yes. The difference is for that to happen, the person has to know the language. They have to have taken something in the language at some point in their life, because basically part of their language, part of their brain is not working quite right because of the stroke, and so instead of accessing English, they're speaking in French or German.
Okay, they're accessing memories that are actually there.
Yeah. A stroke cannot create the ability to speak a language. The idea.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure of, because I was like, that's pretty amazing if that's ever happened. That I would have no explanation for.
Yes, Teresa also says she never made it through the movie without falling asleep, but she loves the book. The book is also extremely good. The head turning obviously isn't true. The soup vomiting is actually perfectly realistic, and you don't need to be demonically possessed to have that happen. It's called projectile vomiting. Ask an EMT about it sometime. They'll tell you stories.
Yeah.
I remember having an EMT tell me once about a little kid vomiting a bit of hot dog with enough force to clear the other side of the ambulance. It went that far, high and far. It's kind of nutty. So yeah, the peace soup thing is perfectly realistic. You don't need demons for it to happen.
Yeah.
Outside of demonic possession, a lot of what demons do looks a lot like a haunting. Footsteps, voices, seeing spirits, objects moving around, losing things is very common. During the Amityville horror case, for example, a fairly significant amount of money simply disappeared out of the house. It was never seen again. There's also what's called apports, where things simply appear out of thin air. Usually this is something like blood or urine or feces. Not always. I've read. I don't have a whole lot of experience with that boards, but I've read some really weird, and funny cases. Usually, there's a logic to it, even when it's goofy. I mean, there's one of the Warrens books where they describe a house that they visited where the walls dripped V8 juice.
Hmm.
Why did they drip V8 juice? The father of the family that the Warrens were there to help was anaphylactically allergic to tomato products. V8's a little bit of an odd choice, I'll grant you, but at least there's some internal logic to it. It's just not going to drip V8 juice because, or maybe demons do like V8 juice. I don't know. I've never asked one.
Got to get their vitamins somehow.
Vitamin demon. Uh, but there are a number of very good movies that lay this out pretty well. The original Conjuring is very realistic.